Yeah? Cool. So I've been given the go-ahead to start. I don't know if I should wave to my mum in case she's watching online. Hi, mum. So, in this session called Reaching Out, what we're going to do a little bit is start to unpack some of the terms that we've been working with as partners on the Strong Voices project. So looking at what disadvantage means, what vulnerable means in terms of young people, and start to think really about some of the ways that we as organisations have worked with that with our partners, and potentially it might also influence your practice as well. So, my name's Anthony. I work at A New Direction. My colleagues here are Judith from Artswork and Lara, who also works at A New Direction. And what we're really going to do in this session is think about how well we know the groups of young people that we work with as organisations, that you work with. Start to think a little bit about whether or not there are more young people that we could be working with that we don't necessarily always work with. To think a bit about unpacking some of the barriers that they might face and the impact, again, that this has on working with them or them working with us. And finally, kind of reflecting a little bit yourselves on who you could be reaching out with. And you may be doing it already. There may be other people that you could be reaching out and doing more work with. So, very quickly, I'm going to run over the context. Judith is going to talk about the frameworks, and then Lara, Judith, and Helen from Juice Festival are going to talk about our key elements of best practice. So kind of building on what Catherine was talking about, 3 things that we found out about that we think are really important in doing in kind of this kind of work with disadvantaged and vulnerable young people, and also giving people a bit of time to have some self-reflection, think about what all this means, and kind of take it all in. So there are some big things that kind of threw up throughout the Strong Voices programme, and there are lots of arguments and conflicts that we've had as organisations, we've had with our partners that we've been speaking about, and one that always comes up is the intrinsic versus kind of the instrumental value of the arts, and the idea that the arts are good, people should do them because they're a good thing and they fulfil people is one argument, but there's also this kind of conflicting argument that says, you know, what's the value of it? How do you prove that? What impact does it have on people? And we kind of recognise that, and we're not going to go too deep into that, but hopefully that will come out through more debates in the day. We also know there's kind of a bit of an assumption that we're making, that we're saying some young people don't access arts and culture. Actually, we know that they do. Young people lead very creative lives, they do lots of things, but maybe there's a kind of not so much breadth to what they're doing, or maybe there's a lack of kind of work with other publicly funded organisations that is interesting to unpick. The last assumption as well, and kind of one that we are all here today are supposed to talk about or to think about, is that the assumption that the arts are actually good for disadvantaged and vulnerable young people. And we know actually there are lots of other programmes and projects and ways of working that can work with these kinds of young people. One of the ways that we've used to prove it in the programme in London has been looking at outcome stars for young people and measuring kind of the impact of our work with them. So we're able to kind of prove that actually doing arts projects with young people is a good thing. We're not going to have a massive amount of time to talk about that, but come and talk to us about it afterwards if you want to find out more. So I get to do the boring bits at the start as well, so I'll be finished very quickly. Basically, I'm going to talk through kind of 2 documents that have been really useful for us in thinking about the kinds of young people that we wanted to work with at the start of this project. The first one is Positive for Youth back in 2011, which is really kind of the government's vision for bringing together lots of different policy around and about young people. So really it kind of thinks about how businesses, the voluntary sector, lots of kind of different people can come together to support children and young people, and particularly with a focus on disadvantage. The other one that's a particularly exciting document, I find it quite exciting, is the Understanding Young People, and this is kind of the analysis from the longitudinal impact study of young people in England. And this document really looks at what disadvantage is, the kinds of kind of labels that are given to young people, and it makes a case really for how multiple disadvantages can be economically problematic and also socially problematic. It's well worth the read. It's very lengthy, but it's got a lot of interesting stuff in. It also actually informed kind of a lot of the ways and groups of young people that we wanted to work with. So, as an organisation, A New Direction has done a lot of research on our other programmes and as part of this programme that looks at the way that young people engage with arts and culture. And I'm going to go through a few key things to build up this picture of how it relates to disadvantage. So we know that young people's first memorable experience of cultural trips, so the kind of your first taste of it, your first thing that you really remember, either happens through school or happens through family. We know that it tends to be family in the higher social grades, looking at that kind of model, and that school plays a really important part for young people from with backgrounds in lower social grades, so lower socioeconomic grades. For us, this paints a really interesting picture, the role that school plays really in kind of levelling out cultural engagement, but also poses a question, if you're not really that engaged with school, or you're not that engaged with your family, who brokers that engagement for you in arts and culture? So we also know that young people from economically disadvantaged backgrounds take part less in things like theatre, drama, music, visits to art galleries, kind of the traditional cultural activities, I suppose. So again, this is looking at those different socioeconomic groups and who engages with what. So we know now that young people are engaging less with certain forms of arts and culture. I should mention that all of this research is up on our website, and I think if you're online, you'll be able to have a look at that as well through a link on the online portal. But for anyone else, go to the newdirection.org.uk website and take a look. The last one, and for me this is really, really interesting, and this is from our latest piece of research, is about disadvantaged and vulnerable young people's understanding of arts and culture. And this really, don't worry about taking it all in, but paints a picture that says that if you are disadvantaged and vulnerable, you have less language, less terms to describe what arts and culture is. So the more technically economically advantaged young people were able to quite clearly describe what arts and culture meant to them, how it related to their lives. If you're not so advantaged, you don't quite know what it is and you don't have the terms to describe it, which is a really interesting problem for us. Oh, skipped ahead too far. So what I'm going to do now is, I've spoken a lot about kind of building up this picture of disadvantage and how that relates to the different young people that we probably all work with. And everyone kind of hopefully has got a bit of an idea about the big themes that are coming out of this. I'm going to pass over to Judith now, who's going to talk a little bit more about the practical things that we've done to address some of these challenges and things that hopefully will spark off other ideas in people's minds. Cool.
Right, thank you, Anthony. So that was a bit of background, a bit of theory, but now I'd like to sort of bring it to what do the young people actually look like and what are their lives? Some of you will have been working with those young people and be very clear about the sort of young people we've been working with, perhaps some of you less so. There's a handout coming out at the minute, and for those people online, there's a resources box on the right-hand side, and we've got some pen portraits that we've done of young people, which are typical of the young people who Strong Voices have been working with. They're not actual young people with real names. Safeguarding is really important to us, but they're very much indicative of young people who we all know. What I'd like you to do, when you get your piece of paper or when you've opened the link, is just to spend 2 minutes having a glance through those young people, seeing if you recognise some of them, and with a little bit of in the back of your mind about how you might engage those young people in the arts and culture that you're involved with. So that's just 2 minutes just to have a look at those young people in front of you.
And if you're online,
Okay, so we will be returning to those young people twice more during the presentation, so don't worry if you feel you want to read more about it. When we were planning this workshop, it was very apparent that to give myself as a background. Is a model that's very prevalent in society, and it says that the young person is our problem. And it's often a model in which we seek to cure that young people's behaviour, or that young people's, how the young people are using the arts as the catalyst. So we say, well, we've got a young person, but actually it's quite difficult to involve them in our project because they don't read too well. So we'll put them on a reading programme, then they can come and join us. They're not in school, which is a bit of a shame because we do most of our work with school. But once we've got them into school, then it will be great. They can come and join our organisation. Or perhaps they're a young parent. Well, they're just the kind of young person we want to reach, but we don't have a creche. So if the young person would like to put their child into childcare, then they'll be really welcome and they can pop along. So really, in that model, it's the young person who needs to change, and then we'll be right there ready to welcome them, and they can join in. And that, as I say, originally came from working with disabled people, and that's how they often perceive the world, that once they've stopped being disabled, they can join in the rest of us. However, in the social model, we turn it on its head, and we say, no, it's not the problem of the young person, actually. Society's the problem. It's our problem that we don't have a creche for that young person's baby. Does it matter if a young person swears in a museum? Whose problem is that? Young people find it difficult to travel to get to us. So why are we not travelling to get to them? Why are we not laying on transport? If they have no money to get here, well, that's not their problem, that's our problem. So it's very much about trying to think about how we address those barriers and what those barriers are for the young people. And it's about us changing those barriers around and changing it on its head. So with those thoughts in your head, and that changing it round, that the barriers are your problem, not the young person's, I'd like you to revisit the young people that you've now got on a piece of paper, or maybe a real young person who you know and have worked with. And I'd like you to turn to your neighbour, or neighbours if there's a threesome in a front row there. And maybe if you're working online, just to think yourself again. And we're going to spend about 5 minutes with your neighbours and saying how you might change your approach, and to look at those young people to say what the barriers of maybe one or two of those young people. Just choose, you're not going to go through all of them, but to choose a young person from that sheet, maybe one you haven't worked with, and look at how you might change your approach to work with that young person. Okay? Sorry? Yes, sorry. There we go. So there's the questions online now. Thank you.
So, okay, so the exercise on that one is to the right of your viewing screen, just below the main program, below the full program. There is a little thing there called pen portraits. That's what we're talking about right now. This is the second reflection exercise, and it's basically for you to think about whether or not the work that Judith has just been talking about and the ideas that she's put forward have been changed from your earlier assessment on a reflection. So maybe there are people that aren't on that pen portraits that you know, but you recognise there might be different ways of approaching them. But just have a think. We've got the room here. It's basically it's awash with a bit of conversation. I know it's harder when you're by yourself online. With that in mind, I'm just reaching down here. Very rude of me, of course. But I do know that there are people that we just want to say a few hellos to. We got Glenn Maskell, who was singing along at home, and he even played the pots and pans with wooden spoon. So Glenn, I take my hat off to you for that. Nick Howe says collaboration can be tiring but mutual. And Bristol Academy of Live Performing Arts, you've just joined us online, so great to see you. So we've got a number of people that are joining us. It's great that you are joining us as well. There is a real buzz in this room. The exercise is underway, so I'm going to stop talking for a moment, and then we're just going to give you a little shot of the room so that we're ready for the next part from Lara, I believe. I don't think at home they're going to be reflecting that much. So, is that mic on as well? Right. Okay. So what we're going to do? We're just going to do a little interview with Anthony. What was that model that Catherine was talking about?
Do I need to look into this?
No.
The social model of disability. And what we've used is we've looked at that in relation to culture.
Okay, so come in a little closer.
Should I stand?
Yeah, that's fine. So just whilst the hubbub in the room's going on, I thought I'd grab Anthony and ask him a little bit more about the model that Judith was talking about. Can you tell us a bit more about this model and what you found from it?
Yeah, great. So the social model of disability is something that we looked at. When we were starting our Strong Voices program, we were really aware that we could be kind of problematizing young people. And one of the things that we wanted to do was look at it less so in terms of young people aren't doing arts and culture, they're not engaging. And really, we use the social model of disability, which looks at saying it's society's problem, not the individual's problem, and related that back to culture. So on our website, actually, there's a bit of a more detailed explanation of this. But essentially what it does is says, cultural organisations, think about what you can change to better meet the needs of more young people that you may not necessarily be working with. So, really, are you being as inclusive as you possibly could be, particularly if you're a publicly funded organisation? So for us, really, it just, instead of problematising those young people and saying they don't engage, what we started to do was talk about organisations, cultural organisations that had traditionally excluded young people from taking part in arts and culture.
So, Anthony, if people want to find out more information about this, where can they write to you, or what's the best place for our people to go to?
Yeah, so I'd say have a look on the A New Direction website. If you Google, if you put into the search bar the social model of disability, it will come up as one of the blog posts. I think also what we can do after the conference is make sure it's sent out and all the information to everyone, but that's probably the best first step, to have a look at it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask you just to keep tweeting in. The hashtag is behind me. I have to keep looking because I want to get it right. It's Strong Voices 15. So keep talking to us, and we're back to the room right now. Thank you very much.
They're always so much more interesting than the person out the front. Because people always say when they come to conferences, what was the best bit? Oh, it's the networking. But hey. So, I hope you did find that interesting and that that was useful. So to come back to Strong Voices and the programme and what's actually been happening. It's been happening, as you know, across the 5 regions, and in each of those 5 regions we've been working with very diverse groups and a number of groups. Those groups have all had labels on the whole, I think. The moment you start working with disadvantaged and vulnerable young people, that in itself is a label. I hate the label personally. Who the heck wants to be labelled as a disadvantaged young person or a vulnerable young person? These are some of the groups and some of the labels that we've worked with nationally. There have been more, so I apologise if I've left out the very group that you're here to represent. Some of those, I'm not going to read through the whole list, it's there, and as I say, it's not an inclusive list, there are other young people. But what's important to note is that some of our young people are on more than one of those categories. Some of our young parents are also homeless young people. Some of our disabled young people go to local authority youth services. They might be care leavers. And in an increasingly fragmented world of targeted services, if services are targeted at groups, if young people are in multiple groups, there's a big chance that they're even more missed out and that they're not catered for in that targeted service. And I think that's a really important thing, that we need to be looking at who those young people are and what their needs are and how we as organisations reach them. So then that brings us to what today is about. It's about disseminating the best practice and the lessons we've really learnt from the Strong Voices programme. We chose 3 elements of best practice to talk about today in our Reaching Out seminar. Those are authenticity, partnership, vision and journey. And it's interesting that they were all things that mattered to all of us. And talking to other people on other programmes too, nationally, that they're things that resonate with all the groups. So I'm just going to talk a bit first about authenticity. And authenticity, that's about young people as artists. Yes, in order to engage a group with the programme, they needed to be defined as disadvantaged. That was where the money had to go. But for me, as the programme coordinator in the South East, the moment they'd been identified, then I needed to lose that label. That label slightly became irrelevant when it came to the programme and actually what those young people did, because they became young people as artists. And the fact that, for the group I'm going to talk about now, that they happen to have autism was almost irrelevant. We worked down in Portsmouth with Portsmouth Autism Support Network. We started with a very short taster workshop in the first summer on photography. We then, in year 1, did an animation project when 10 young people got their Bronze Arts Award making an animation. For year 2, we wanted to go on and do something in depth, so that because some of those young people really wanted to do their Silver Arts Award. So what we did was introduce them to Royal Armouries and Fort Nelson, which is a Napoleonic fort on the hill above Portsmouth that has an amazing collection of artillery, and it also has a fabulous building with lots of tunnels and very exciting places. We introduced them to artists called Butterfly FX, who do light graffiti and work with photography, so it built on the animation from the year before. The young people were then able to explore the artefacts at the museum in depth with the learning team there. They were able to explore the technology. They were young people who were very comfortable with technology. It was going out and meeting people that they were really uncomfortable with. So actually the technology really helped, because it helped them in their comfort zone. And to learn about Photoshop was really what they wanted. They were less keen about coming out to a public space. They then created the images that are displayed and that are around today, or in fact a lot more images now, obviously, and those have been put into a film which is available online, and we're going to see a very short piece of in a minute. They also curated an exhibition of those images, which took place at Royal Armouries over the February half term 5,500 people visited Royal Armouries at Portsmouth during that time, and the visitors book is amazing about the engagement and how very small children, in fact, engage with the images, and the feedback was fantastic. So it's been an amazing project for the young people. Royal Armouries have been really excited because they feel it's been a way of engaging people who are not passionate about artillery, and there may be people in this room who think going to a museum just to look at artillery is maybe not their idea of a great day out. But the curator, it's not just the curator of Royal Armouries said that, I'm quoting him, it's a way of looking at something in a new light and putting their spin on it. So we're now going to have a look at the Light Fever video, which is going to start any minute now. Thank you.
The voice of the guns. We are the guns, and your masters. Saw ye our flashes? Heard ye the scream of our shells in the night, and the shuddering crashes?
Soldier! Explosion!
Saw ye our work by the roadside, the shrouded things lying, moaning to God that he made them, the maimed and the dying, husbands or sons, fathers or lovers? We break them. We are the guns.
Thank you. I should also say that they made all of that soundtrack themselves with a local artist, and that the poem that they used is a poem that's hung in the museum in the gallery, and it's a First World War poet. And what's been very lovely is that because we had to seek permission for the poetry to be used publicly, then the grandson of the poet who holds the copyright is going to come down and meet the young people because he's so pleased that they're using his grandfather's poem. So it's had a real knock-on effect from that. So our next key point that we'd like to talk about is partnership, and I'd like to welcome Helen Ferguson, who's from Juice Festival, and we've already seen some lovely images from Juice Festival during Catherine's speech. There we go. Thanks, Nico.
Hi everyone. As we've just said, you might have seen some of the images earlier on the PowerPoint of the project I'm going to talk about today, and there are also some more outside in the foyer just to give you a better idea of what it was all about, because the images tell the story really well. I just wanted to give a little bit of context about where I'm from first, especially for those people who maybe aren't based in the region and don't know about Juice Festival. Juice Festival is Newcastle Gateshead's festival for children and young people. The public element of the festival takes place across half term in October, but we work on projects pretty much all year round. And Juice Festival is based on a partnership model. So we work in partnership with organisations and venues across Newcastle Gateshead. And we also work with schools, which is what I'm going to talk about today, and the project I'm going to talk about today. So we have 5 partner schools that have been on board for 2 years now, and one of those is the Cedars Academy, and a lot of their pupils and teachers were in the lovely photographs that were up earlier. Juice Festival works in partnerships with these schools and builds programmes of activity with them to engage in that. Some run alongside the festival, some are directly involved in the public element, but it's all very sort of flexible and organic how it comes about. And we work with people of all different ages, 0 to sort of early adult really, and many, many different art forms. So I'll explain a bit about the project that I want to tell you about today first, and then I'm just going to tell you a bit about some things we've learned and the kind of journey we went on through it. So the project was with the Cedars Academy, who were a special educational needs and disability school in Gateshead, and the Lawnmowers Theatre Company in partnership with Juice Festival. And it was designed so that the practitioners from Lawnmowers, one was a music percussion-based practitioner and the other was a drama mask clowning practitioner, were to work with pupils from Cedars Academy to create their own bespoke pieces of artwork, so to create a performance, so to compose some music and perform that and conduct it, and also to create a mask and clowning performance, which was really brilliant and hilarious. In terms of the journey of that, and I've been asked today to focus a bit more on partnerships, so I kind of thought about what each partner brought to the process, and I thought the easiest way to talk about that would just be to talk through the project and what happened and who brought what. So really it all started with the school looking for provision, looking for artistic provision. A lot of their provision in the past had been music and visual arts, so they were really looking for more dance and drama. They'd had quite a bad experience with drama in the past and were a little bit uneasy with it and didn't really want to do it, but they were looking to do their Artswork. They'd joined up as a Juice partner school, so they knew that they wanted to increase their provision across all art forms. So it started with the school bringing their kind of knowledge of their students, their pupils. It's really simple. They described the experience they'd had in the past with drama, and they described why they didn't like that. I think it was stand at the side of the stage, walk on, stand there and say it like this kind of experience. But again, as Catherine mentioned earlier, that was what they knew, and through various different reasons that they hadn't known where else to look. So Juice stepped in, and our role really was to sort of broker those partnerships, to think creatively about how we could bring all those partners together to really enhance what they were doing within their art provision in school. So we brought up the Lawnmowers Theatre Company, and again, they kind of knew who Lawnmowers were, but they were a bit uneasy about working with them and they weren't sure. And similarly, Lawnmowers had tried to get into the school before and tried to do activity, but it just hadn't really come about. So we really, it all started with conversations. We talked to the school, we talked through all of the different things, we talked through why we thought Lawnmowers would be great to work with, and it all started with, in year one, with taster workshops. From those taster workshops, then we brought in the most important partners in all this, which were the young people. And they'd had those experiences, it had gone really well, and they picked the practitioners that they liked the best, that they had the connection with. Again, going back to what Catherine was saying, it's not just about connection in terms of our networks and our partnerships, but connection between those young people and the people they're working with. That creative connection had happened. So they identified those two practitioners that they really wanted to work with to create their own piece. We then collaborated with the artists involved. We talked to them about what we wanted to achieve from the project. We wanted a showcase at the end. We wanted the young people to be able to show their own performance at the end. So those artists, their sort of specialist skill, or just the way they work, actually, just their approach, it's not specialist at all, it's just their creative approach that worked in that context. They brought that, and we were able to discuss what we'd discuss with the teachers and bring everyone together to decide what the approach was going to look like. Within that, there were practicalities like where should we hold the sessions, and it was really great because in the taster workshops they were more keen to have them in school because the needs of their students, they felt like they would have a better experience that way and they would be able to engage better. But then we talked to the teachers and they said, no, we think it's time now that we can maybe do half and half, and we can have some sessions in school and some out at the Lawnmowers. So it was great to take those young people out to their venue into a professional context. Other things like the length of the sessions, it all sounds very, very simple, but they were all things that we needed to have conversations about to make sure that we got the best out of it. And also the kind of showcase opportunity. So that's where Juice came in terms of our kind of priorities, and what we wanted to get from it was we wanted an output in our festival. So we had, in the week before Juice Festival, we had our schools week where a lot of our schools performed in different showcase opportunities or displayed work or launched work. And we were then able to bring our expertise and go, why don't we create a showcase that looks like this? So practically in the end, it's what you saw on the screen. It was in school. We invited the wider school community in to see what we did and what the young people had created, and they performed to their teachers, wider school staff, grown-ups, other peers, other pupils from the school. And we kind of tailored that all together. So the school, Juice and the artists all brought their input in to make sure that it was a suitable kind of atmosphere for that showcase. So you saw Paddy on the screen. He sort of facilitates the performance, and if anyone's ever seen any of Paddy's work before, they'll understand. It's very inclusive, and it's not stand there, walk on and say it like that. it just kind of happens on the day, and whatever happens on the day happens on the day, and Paddy kind of works through that with the young people. And similarly, Brendan, there was a moment where they performed a piece of music they composed, and one of the young people was conducting, and she decided that actually she wanted it to be really short on that day. So it was a kind of little micro piece of music, and Brendan went, okay, that's fine, if that's what you want, that's what we'll do. So that was really great. So I've talked a bit about kind of what the school brought, what the young people brought, the artists and Juice, and the practicalities of it. In terms of the outcomes, the teachers' insight into that was really brilliant, and they were able to kind of keep us on track, and they knew that what we were doing was working well. There were moments where particular pupils would get up or get involved, and that was a real surprise to the teachers, so we knew that what we were doing was developing the art form and developing engagement of those pupils. And I guess the most important thing I think from it was just time for that conversation and that dialogue, because we wouldn't have got there without giving time to that connection, to enable the collaboration to happen, to enable everything to work in the most successful way it could, to really be tailored to the needs of everyone involved. And in terms of legacy, really what we would love to see next is more sharing of that practice, more showcases for young people's work, and sharing with that wider school and public community. A lot of the parents and grown-ups who came along really wanted to get up and have a go afterwards, and we just didn't have time because it was the end of the school day and everyone had to go home. So next time I think we could make a whole day of it, and the parents could get up at the end and they could play on the glass orchestra, and they could put a mask on and do a little clowning session with Paddy. So I think that's really what we'd like to see next. That's our project. Thank you for listening. I'm going to hand over to Lara now.
Hello. So I'm going to talk about our third case study, which is around establishing a vision and how you continually reassess that vision as you go on a journey. So I'm based in London at A New Direction, and we've formed a partnership with London Youth. So through London Youth, we worked with different youth clubs throughout the city to engage different vulnerable and disadvantaged young people. Our case study today is about the Avenues, who specialise in working with young people at risk of offending and who work quite closely with the Integrated Gangs Unit. So working with the Avenues, we talked about establishing a vision and what it was that they wanted to accomplish. They said that they wanted the young people to explore the daily politics of their lives, and they felt that forum theatre would be a good way of challenging them and getting them to work together and getting them to get team skills and leadership skills, and that was the vision that they wanted to follow. So we brought in a forum theatre organisation to work with the young people, but unfortunately there was no consistency. The young people were not always attending, there wasn't a core group, and therefore we weren't able to have the outcomes that they wanted to have. So what transpired was actually that the young people were attending dance-offs and had formed their own dance company at the centre, and were working with volunteers to do this. And in consultation with the young people, we actually established that what they really wanted to do was work with dance artists. So, as we heard from Helen earlier, the most important partners needed to be consulted in establishing that vision. And so the Youth Centre came together with the young people and established a new vision. And the vision was that they wanted to explore new dance moves. They wanted to work with crump and breakdancing and all sorts of different forms of dance. And so once we had established this with them, we had to find the right partners. And the young people really wanted to work with Breaking Convention, who are an international hip-hop festival and have fantastic dance artists across lots of different forms. So we were able to establish a partnership that reflected the vision that the young people were interested in. It offered high-quality opportunities. So they went to see a hip-hop dance festival and work with international artists. They got to work with the people who invented crump. So they were enthused and dedicated from the get-go. It was like seeing a completely new group of young people, because they had established what they wanted to do and had a voice in shaping it. They were completely committed. They came to every session, they were interested, and they were really pleased that they had this opportunity. They didn't feel like they had been harangued into something. So the tutors that they worked with were also extremely good role models, and this was something that the young people had felt that they wanted to see. They wanted to see artists who came from backgrounds like them, and it was important for their journey. So throughout the process, we did action research, as Catherine mentioned in the beginning, and it was a chance to continually reflect on what we were doing. Were we reaching our vision? Were the young people gaining the skills that the youth centre wanted them to? Did the young people feel like they were doing what it was that they had signed up to do? And this reflective process was really interesting. There were definitely hiccups along the way, so expectations from partners weren't always aligned. Those had to be looked at again and again, and we were constantly learning. But because we had a strong partnership and an aligned vision, and we had reliable senior management support, as well as on-the-ground youth workers that were continually talking to the young people, we were able to constantly come back to what we wanted our vision to be and whether we were successful in achieving it or not. And that was integral in the process. We were able to map where we had started and where we wanted to get to and the process that we went on to get there. So this led to a long-term partnership. They worked with Breaking Convention for over a year, and they actually supported the young people to set up their own dance company. That dance company of young people who were previously unengaged and actively sitting down to not participate in a session now performs all over London. They've been invited to other youth clubs to perform. They've been invited to a dance-off at Wembley. So they've really honed their skills as a company. And they know that they rely on each other. And they've gained life skills as well as dance skills, which is exactly what the youth centre wanted to offer them. They also performed at our second residential. We had a sharing event, and all of the staff and all of the young people were up on the chairs and up on the tables dancing, and everyone came in for a jam at the end. And these young people that previously hadn't wanted anything to do with anyone else felt so proud of what they were doing that they wanted to share it. And that was because they were a part of creating it. They had that ownership, and that was so integral to the vision and something that had actually possibly been overlooked at the beginning. So, moving on to what has been achieved, not just by this project, but looking at the 3 parts of best practice that we've talked about. So having a vision, for that program to be authentic and to have the right partners in place. Looking at those elements, we have some really tangible examples of how this has worked and made an impact in the work that we've done. So through our action research and also the outcome star monitoring that Anthony mentioned, we've been able to monitor the types of changes that have been achieved by implementing best practice. So I'm going to use the residential retreats that we went on as an example. So in the first year, it was all very rushed. We received the money, we had to create our partnerships, and we had to go, as often happens when you have a project. And we didn't have a lot of time to run outreach sessions with the young people. So they came and they were going to do different taster activities, try out new art forms, and see how that went. And whilst that was great for some young people who already had a vocabulary around the arts and a familiarity around it, other young people didn't necessarily feel safe to participate, and they weren't able to bring their best game to the table, essentially. They took part in some of the activities, but a lot of the time they didn't feel able to take part. And what we did for the second residential is that we had year-long partnerships where the young people got a chance to really know the art form, the artists they were working with, and obviously their youth workers and the group that they were participating with. They came to the residential ready to show everyone what they had been doing and to do a sharing event at the end. And they had established that a sharing event was really important to them and that they wanted to show off the skills that they had built. So by putting the 3 elements of best practice in place, we enabled the partnerships to last for a long period of time, the young people to feel proud of what they had done because it was an authentic engaging with the art form, and to have a vision that was established by the young people. So as I said, at the end of the residential, there was a fantastic energy and everyone was involved, and people were sharing music videos, pieces of dance, pieces of theater. It was all sorts of different art forms, and there was a real peer-to-peer learning from young people from all sorts of different walks of life and all sorts of different parts of London. They stated that they felt that their progression and creativity had grown, and the young people said that this was one of the best projects that they had ever participated in. There was overwhelmingly positive feedback from the partnerships and from the young people, as well as the residential centre. So we felt that that was a really tangible example of how putting those things in place helped us benefit. So enough of us talking. We've got a final activity for you. We're going to ask you to look at those 3 key pieces of best practice. So we want you to consider what your vision for working with vulnerable and disadvantaged young people is. And this can be as an organization, as an individual practitioner, or for a specific project. And you can look at one of your pen portraits for the group of young people, or consider a group that you currently work with. We want you to consider what your desired outcome is in working with these young people, what partnerships need to be in place, and how you can make it really authentic, whether that's through high-quality resources, or long enough sessions, or having the support workers in place that you need. So all of the things that can make a project authentic for a young person, what is that, and what do you need to put in place? So if you take a few minutes to think about it individually, have some reflection time, and then again, we'll ask you to turn to the person next to you when you're ready and have a conversation. Thank you. If you're online, please do this on your own. You can also contribute via Twitter. We can do it if people aren't, but I think they will get there. Yeah, I'll sit down.
Reliability is key for providing artists as role models to. And I've also got Gina Howe says partnerships need time and lots of conversations.
Is this on?
Okay, so whilst everybody in the room here is doing their own exercise, I thought I'd bring Anthony back again because we're getting some comments. You've got some great comments coming through, and just to pick up on a couple, we've got Catherine Haywood, who says reliability is key for providing artists as role models to young people. We got Jean actually Hale says partnerships need time and lots of conversations. So Anthony, do you agree with both of those statements, or
Yeah,
what
of course.
would you say to that?
Yeah, so actually the reliability is a really interesting one. We've been, particularly actually with the example that Lara was talking about with the avenues, what happened is they were working with an arts organisation that wasn't maybe necessarily, the arts organisation was great, but for those young people it wasn't necessarily the right kind of art form that they were interested in and didn't work for them. What happened is that we obviously found out that dance was a much bigger part and young people were going off and doing dance outside of the programme that we were running. So, you know, through a kind of conversation with the managers at the youth club and through the team there, we flipped it and we said, you know what, not a problem, let's change it, let's make it work for the young people that are involved.
Yeah.
And actually we got Breaking Convention into the club and they had two of their artists that came in and worked consistently with the young people every week, and they were there, it's really interesting, they were kind of there as role models actually the whole time. The young people that go to the avenues or that maybe kind of are involved with the group don't always or have kind of quite flexible home lives. Some of the young people may not be at home all the time, they may not be living with family or parents, and actually the artists that were working there became this kind of quite stable partner, I suppose, in the programme alongside the youth club, and they were working, it was quite funny, on the second residential. It was almost like a military drill.
Brilliant.
So there were groups of young people outside doing push-ups and dripping with sweat outside, and that was really built up through this very kind of quite strong relationship between that group of young people and these two fantastic artists that they've been working with.
But I guess a lot of that started from the fact that they were listened to as this isn't quite working for us, or this isn't the path that we want to go down to, so can we actually change it, can we make it better for us.
Yeah.
And that's really what you guys picked up on.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you get organisations and they get a little bit stuck. You know, either it's this way or there's no way.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really work in this environment, does it? I
Yeah,
don't think.
and I think, you know, it's interesting. We talk about having a conversation with the young people. Actually, we didn't really sort of go and sit down in a room and
Yeah.
talk to them about it. It was more about realising what those young people were doing, how they were actually what they were actually doing in terms of their time, and
Yeah.
they were kind of showing us what they weren't doing by voting with their feet. They weren't coming along to sessions and engaging. So, being able to just sort of work with the senior management at the youth club and
Yeah.
with the arts organisation to say, you know what, this really isn't working. We don't have to push on with it and force this to happen.
No.
We'll end it, we'll change it, and we'll start something fresh that
So
does work.
do you have, you mentioned senior management. If they're not engaged, it's not really going to happen, I'd suggest, well, maybe.
Yeah.
But any tips or tricks of how you get senior management really involved, and you know, what's worked for you in the past, or what do you know of that's worked well for people?
I think it's really tricky because it's quite often it's not that necessarily senior management don't want to be involved or they
Right.
don't care. There are lots of different things, and it's important to remember, I think, with projects in schools or in youth
Yeah.
clubs or wherever, that there are a multitude of different things that are going on.
Yeah.
And actually, one particular project or program may not be the most important part of that person's time. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about, and that Catherine sort of referenced this morning, is the idea of assuming best intent.
Yeah.
So the idea that actually, although when you're communicating with someone, there might be a lot of barriers, and it might be really difficult to get your point across.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's about realising that you're both trying to do something purposeful
Yeah.
and worthwhile, and you
Yeah.
both want to do positive things for young people. Nobody kind of goes into education or youth work or the arts to kind of marginalise people or to push them out, really. So that idea of assuming best intent has been really key for us.
Brilliant, brilliant. So excellent. I'm really grateful that all your tweets are coming down. We're saying hello to Leeds right now because Leeds were basically they tweeted in and said hi, so we're saying hi back. And I think we're going to be going back to the main room in a moment. I can't quite tell. Do you think that people are ready to go again, or they're ready to go?
Yeah, I think they've got another 2
yeah,
minutes.
okay. So we're going to let you have a little more self-reflection at home, but keep sending your tweets in. The hashtag, I will remember it by the end of the time. It's Strong Voices 15. Just double check in, but it is there. And you can see all the partner organisations just to my side here that have been working so much on this Strong Voices project, which today is a bit sad, Anthony. I think today is almost a bit of a farewell of 2 years of hard work by 5 partner organisations. And I know we can't really say much more because we'll be going across, but you guys have done a tremendous amount of work, and I think that a number of people are really picking up on that. So there's a great buzz in this room, and there's a great buzz on our online audience, for you online as well. So thank you for being with us, and keep staying with us, please, because, keep sending your comments in. It makes the whole day even richer. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. We've got 5 minutes left, so we were just wondering if there were any people who wanted to share key things that they would change or interesting things that came up out of their conversations, just a chance to hear from other people in the room. And we've got 2 microphones, so if anybody has something they want to say, just put your hand up and we'll bring the microphone to you. Got someone here?
Hi, I'm just interested actually because I was just sharing here about We started some work with young carers some years ago. I work for a local authority, and we fund work with all sorts of different groups through arts organisations and develop all sorts of partnerships. And we got a certain way down the track in funding some work with young carers, and some learning came out of that, but for various reasons to do with all sorts of tedious things to do with cuts and so on, that work sort of suddenly stopped short. And I'm really interested to know how to pick up work with young carers again. If anybody's got any, I just don't feel we got enough learning out of it to know the effective ways of engaging young carers. So any experience of that I'd be really interested to hear about.
In Portsmouth, we've also done quite a lot of work with young carers, and I would share your experience. It's really hard because of the intermittent nature, and for us it depended hugely on the partnership with the organisation, and we found it very difficult to get the young carers organisation on board. And frustratingly, the young people were saying they wanted to share stuff with other young carers, and nothing happened. Then we discovered they had a website they could have uploaded it to, and it just didn't happen. So I'm afraid I personally can't, but I would share your frustration, and I think it's work to do, and they're often a group that are missed out when we talk about disadvantaged young people. Has anybody else got experience of young? Yeah, Holly.
I'll just chip in actually really quickly, because I think it comes back to we're going to have to shuffle around. I wouldn't normally like to talk on microphones like this, but it's why the shared vision element is kind of particularly important, because actually, we know there are lots of arts organisations that will go and will want to talk and will want to develop really excellent partnerships that's kind of centred around their artistic vision. And really, I think what we found is by having that shared vision. So, what's really unique and special about the kind of the offer that you're making to those people that do work with young people in care or care leavers, and really kind of not selling, but being able to really clearly articulate why culture is the important thing that will really improve outcomes for those young people, I think is quite important. And both being on the same level about it, both kind of respecting the expertise that each organisation has is really important.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that in the Northwest through Strong Voices, we've been working with Bernardo's on a specific project for young carers with the Duke's Theatre in Lancaster, and that's going great guns, and they've been having a fantastic time with, I think it's 3 separate young carers groups from across Lancashire, and they are coming together for a sharing event between the 3 groups at the end of March. So if you'd like to know more about that and how that partnership's been working, I know some vague details, but the best person to speak to would be Kelly, who's at the back, because she holds all the information for Strong Voices in the Northwest. But yeah, speak to Cal.
And for our online audience, that's Kelly at Curious Minds, who you can get in touch with. Were there any other points that came up from the conversations that people will be interested in sharing? We've just got a couple minutes left. Got someone here?
It's sort of a general insight or reflection that I have just from sitting and listening and hearing everything everyone has to say, and partly from what Judith said about the labels and struggling with like the terms disadvantaged and all the labels. That seems somehow necessary to engage in a conversation about these things, but also kind of sit uncomfortably sometimes. But just sitting here and reflecting, that there was something for me that came up about how it can seem like or feel like there's a group of people with ideas and vision and resources and a real desire to support, uplift, empower people who are disadvantaged or have seemingly less opportunities. But it just struck me that it's helpful for me to see it in the way that like there's a need to hear the stories or to hear the voices, and arts and creativity. One way of describing it could be, a way of giving people a voice or a way of sharing stories in a wider, more open language. And that there's actually a need. So it's not that necessarily people who have resources just want to, give something to people who are disadvantaged. But there's like somehow at this time for us in this world as humans, there's a need for us, whoever us is, like for me, to hear other people's stories and to hear. So there's a very real and practical seeing experience of the mutuality that occurs in any of this work, which is about providing opportunities. And so when we're talking about the need to justify the value of arts practice or of arts opportunity, somehow it's seen immediately and clearly for me in just that sense that those stories need to be heard, like there's a yearning for that, and yeah. That was just a reflection.
I was just going to say, the Warwick Commission report, which recently came out, talks about the importance of diversity. And obviously, diversity in the workforce is always a thing that's talked about, but actually, diversity for the arts sector and the voices that are heard within that and enabling those voices to be heard is so important. And I know we've only got 11 seconds left, so I'm just going to let you speak, because yeah.
We'll do one last question if anyone has anything
We've
else.
only got 10 seconds.
We can do it.
Okay.
We can. Does anyone have a last question?
Sorry, nobody dare have the 11-second question.
We're in the red. So, going to go to our last slide. Oh, no. Here we go. So thank you very much for participating in this conversation with us. And that's the lens that we're looking at ourselves with. So we're here for the rest of the day. Please do speak to us if you want to. And I've got a couple of housekeeping notes for you. So just to remind you to be thinking about and submitting questions via the boxes ahead. So if there's anything that's come up that's really interesting and you want to continue talking about, write it down and it will be involved in the panel debate if there's a lot of people that are interested in it as well. And lunch is now being served in the Hall 2 bar. Is that the right point? Yes, that way. So there'll be further seminar sessions afterwards, and they're all listed on your badge. So thank you very much for listening today.